Hello, good morning everyone. I'm here to talk to you today about hormones and weight loss as usual. And we're going to be talking about some of the problems that there often are with the testing of hormones, specifically sex hormones in this instance. And if you hear some strange noises while I'm on here, then you're not imagining it. I've got my neighbour's dog round. I'm just looking after her while she goes out. So that means that my dog and her dog are running around like lunatics, and when they come in here they sound like a steam engine because they're both puffing and panting. But they're having a lovely time, so that's the good news. So I wanted to talk about this because lots of the women that I work with, they want to have their hormones tested, and often they think they have had their hormones tested when maybe they haven't. Well, they've had some hormones tested, but maybe not the hormones that really give us useful information. So most women, when they go to the doctors and they ask to have their hormones checked, usually what happens is they'll have their FSH, or follicular stimulating hormone, or LH, which is luteinizing hormone, checked. These are hormones that are involved in your ovulation, and they fluctuate depending on where you are in your cycle. So when levels of particularly the FSH go really high, that can be a sign that you are menopausal or postmenopausal, because basically your body is sending out a really strong signal to your ovaries to release an egg, and it's not happening, so you're producing more and more hormones. So what those hormones tell us is whether you're ovulating or not. And it's kind of helpful, because if the levels are abnormal, then it means that maybe there are some issues with ovulation. In terms of determining whether you're perimenopausal or menopausal, it's again helpful, but only if you have several tests done, because these hormones are all over the place, and your menopause is where you stop ovulating and your ovaries stop functioning. So when you're going through menopause, you don't just suddenly stop. Sometimes you do, but very rarely just suddenly stop ovulating. You might ovulate 1 month, it might take a few months, and then you might ovulate again. So your hormones can be up and down and all over the place. So these tests, they're helpful once you've had them done several times to know where you're at. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really help us in terms of like nutritionists, in terms of what we recommend to you to balance your hormones. They're not that insightful for determining what's going on, why you might be having problems, why you might be struggling with stubborn weight. Because if we get down to the problem that most of the women that we work with have, it's stubborn weight, and those hormones don't really tell us very much. Now, when we work with our clients, we used to test for the hormones, the actual sex hormones, so estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and their metabolites. And in some cases we still do. If someone has a particular hormone condition, then we may well do direct testing on those hormones. But more often than not, what we actually prefer to do is test for the things that impact your hormones rather than the hormones themselves. Because when we used to test for the actual hormones, yeah, it was interesting, but it didn't particularly change what we would have recommended if we hadn't have done those tests, because we can determine quite a lot through symptom analysis and without having to actually test the sex hormones. So we decided that actually what would be much more helpful would be to test for the things that actually impact those hormones. So if you were watching the video earlier in the week, I was talking about various different ways that hormones can become imbalanced. And I was talking about how deficiencies can be an issue, how inflammation can be an issue. It can stop your hormones from kind of stimulating the receptors properly. I was talking about how your liver is very involved in the detoxification of your hormones, and therefore your toxic load is very much involved in hormone balance. I was talking about how we produce bile and we pass hormones via the bile into the digestive tract. So the bile is an area that very much impacts hormones, and then the digestive tract is as well, because if there are imbalances in the bacteria in the gut, that can very much impact your hormones. So what we find so much more helpful is to test those areas. So we look at deficiencies and, whether you are getting enough, not only your micronutrients, which are your vitamins and minerals, but also the macronutrients, which are your fats and your proteins and your carbohydrates. So we look at all of that. And then we also look at inflammatory markers. We will look at your detoxification. Have you got a high toxic load? Is your liver, functioning well? Does it need more support? We will also look at the balance of bacteria and yeasts in the gut, whether you're absorbing things properly, because of course, if you're not absorbing very well, then you're probably going to have some deficiencies, and therefore that's going to be impacting your hormones. So we like to look at, are you absorbing, are you digesting, but also what's the bacteria doing, what's the yeast doing? Are there imbalances there? The answer is probably yes, because we see that all the time. And your gut bacteria is very impacted by what's going on in your life. Stress is impacted by your hormones, and it also impacts your stress and your hormones and your liver detoxification and pretty much everything. So the gut is always a big focus for us. Here come the dogs. So we look at all of that, and we also look at some of the things that give us some indications about what the bile is doing, and we can tell that from some liver function markers and a few other bits. So we assess all those areas, all those different points where the hormones can become imbalanced, so that we can optimize any areas that are out of balance, which helps us to optimize the hormone balance, as opposed to just testing the hormones and not really knowing why those hormones are imbalanced. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully that helps you, if you've been talking to your doctor about your hormones and you feel like you're not really getting anywhere, then that might be why, because the tests that they do, they're really just trying to determine whether you're ovulating or not. Occasionally, if you go to a consultant, they may test your estrogen level, your progesterone, your testosterone, if they're trying to determine whether HRT would be helpful. But that's kind of all it tells you, whether or not you could do with a bit of a top up. And it doesn't get into that nitty gritty of why are those hormones imbalanced. And, the key thing to understand here is that there are things that you can do at every single point in that chain where hormones are produced, where they are having their mode of action, where they're detoxed, where they're removed. All of those areas are points where you can make quite simple changes to address these areas and balance your hormones. And in some cases you may still need a top up of hormones, but if you're not addressing the underlying cause and you're just topping up, then it's never going to be the full solution. And you might feel like taking the HRT helps, but maybe it's not, you're not back to your normal self. So that's what we do with our clients. And if you're someone who wants a more targeted support, a more individualized approach where we can look at all of these things and more, because we look at loads of other stuff as well, so that you can get a really targeted and actionable action plan, then do not hesitate to get in touch. The best thing to do is to schedule in a weight loss breakthrough call with us. This is where you can come and talk to us for free, and we can assess what's going on for you, where you're at right now, what is it you want to achieve, and what it is that you need to get you there. So that is a great way of us to kind of determine what are the best next steps for you. Is that with us? And if so, what does that look like? And if it's not with us, then what does that look like as well? So it's about helping you to just map out your next steps from here. So if that sounds good to you, then I'm going to drop a link in the comments where you're going to be able to schedule your weight loss breakthrough call with one of our specialists. And you'll get a confirmation email come through when you do book that. If it doesn't come through, then it probably means you've put in a mistake in your email address. So just let us know if you don't get your confirmation email come through. All right, well, hopefully this has been helpful. If it has, make sure you give it a like, and I'll be back next week with more stuff to talk about. Bye.